I am Peter Lavenda, your host for this interview with a very, very special guest that I have been over-preparing for, you might say, because I don't want to lose this opportunity. What I'm going to say is that we're talking to a man who made a tremendous impact on a lot of people that I know with a book that he published in 1976 called The Serious Mystery. This book, which combined elements of Egyptian, African, Babylonian, Sumerian, Greco-Roman mythologies, cultures, technologies, to provide evidence for the possibility of alien contact more than 5,000 years ago or so, made a tremendous impact on a lot of people. Since then, he's written many other books, of course, and he was a colleague of another hero of mine, Dr. Joseph Needham, one of the foremost China specialists, with whom he wrote a book called The Genius of China, which is now a book that you'll find in Chinese being read in Chinese secondary schools. He's a visiting professor at Tsinghua University in Beijing, among other things. And we're going to talk to him today about his newest and latest book, which is a real stunner on in the same avenue as The Serious Mystery. It's called The Sphinx Mystery, and I'm very pleased today to introduce to you Dr. Robert Temple. Dr. Temple, how are you?
Hello, I'm fine. I'm blushing from your introduction.
Oh, not at all. I mean, I have been looking forward to this for a long time. I've been a fan of yours for many years, which probably dates both of us, but I've read Netherworld cover to cover. Just all of your books have been a tremendous contribution to what we know, or to reveal what we don't know about ancient history. And your approach has been such that I think it's on your website. Rupert Sheldrake says it best. It's integrative thinking, and I think this kind of approach is exactly what we need to understand the esoteric nature of what's gone on before. I mean, to understand the Sphinx. I mean, you make a very good point in the very opening of your book. You go to see the Sphinx, and you're looking at it, and you're stunned that there's something terribly wrong with what you've been told about the Sphinx, that the consensus reality we've grown up with is obviously drastically in error. Could you tell us just a little bit about how you came upon that conclusion that there was something wrong with what everybody knew, quote unquote, about the Sphinx?
Well, when Olivia and I first saw it, we were just minding our own business and being ordinary tourists, and we weren't expecting to find anything unusual. We thought we were going to see the Sphinx. And then we saw this thing, and it wasn't the Sphinx. And it was both instantly realized that everybody had everything all wrong. It just had so many things wrong with it that just they weren't right at all. And one of the first things that you could notice was that it was this gigantic stone statue that seemed to go on forever, about the size of an ocean liner, and stuck on the top of one end was this little pimple that was in place of a head, and it was so out of proportion that really one wanted to burst out laughing. It was too ridiculous, and it was immediately obvious that it couldn't have been the original head, that it must have been cut down and recarved, because the Egyptians never did anything like that. Nobody in the history of the world has been more fanatical about correct proportion in buildings and statues and pictures than the Egyptians. To put a tiny head on a giant body would be impossible for them. They could never hold their heads up again for shame. So there was something really wrong there, and that was the first thing. And then we looked at the body, and we thought, well, that's not a lion. And we looked and we looked, and we kept trying to see a lion, and really we began to think we must be lion dyslexic, because we obviously lacked the ability which other people had, which was the ability to see lions, and it just wasn't there. And so we're both great dog lovers, and our dog was alive at that time, and we said, well, it looks like him. And because it's got a completely straight back, you see, and it's crouching there just like a dog crouches when it's guarding you. When Olivia gardens, when our dog was alive, she used to do that with her back to Olivia in exactly the pose of the Sphinx, looking outwards to guard her against the approach of whoever might come, you know. And this is what dogs do. And lions don't look like that. They've got great big macho chests and manes, and so in the Sphinx mystery, I gathered together lots of Egyptian canonical pictures of lions to show, even one with the grid lines to show the geometrical way in which they constructed these. And I went back as far as the first dynasty to show early lions and how lions had never changed throughout Egyptian art history, and that they were always totally different from the Sphinx. And so it was obvious to us that this was a dog, and the famous dog is Anubis, the god Anubis, and that's obviously what this had once been, and that the head had somehow got lost, and a bit of it was left, and they'd carved a face on it later into this little tiny pimple, which they call a head. But when you see photos of the Sphinx, you see it from the front, so you see this wonderful face and head, and you don't realize that it's out of proportion with the body. Exactly. Pictures don't show you that. You have to be there.
Well, one thing that I can tell listeners, the book, The Sphinx Mystery, is lavishly illustrated, and it's really a gorgeous production because of the way you've handled the patina of the photographs, if you will, throughout the book. The photographic evidence shouts out for the kind of interpretation that you've done. When you look at the Sphinx from all these different angles, and then you look at the other documentation you've amassed, you come away with this understanding that I think you even used the illusion of the emperor's new clothes. I mean, we've been told that the Sphinx is a lion for so long, and I grew up believing that and not questioning it until you came along and questioned it. And by questioning it, you've opened up an entire category of research into everything from the golden angle of resurrection, as you call it, to the resurrection cult itself that was based on the pyramids. I mean, it calls for a reevaluation of what we thought we knew. And the fact that the Sphinx was actually originally Anubis makes obvious sense. I mean, it's excellent. It's common sense, you might say. I'm just blown away by the research itself.
Well, thank you. It took some doing to try to figure out whose face was on the recarved head, and I can't claim credit for being original there because what I did was I excavated an old article published towards the end of the 19th century by a German Egyptologist called Ludwig Burckhardt, which everybody had dismissed long ago, called On the Age of the Sphinx at Giza, in German, of course. I translated this whole thing. It's all in appendix in English, and that was very difficult because Burckhardt was a stuffy sort of fellow, and he wrote this pompous Victorian German. It's so difficult to read. And he wrote this before the Sphinx was properly excavated, so he was writing about the head, not the whole Sphinx, because he couldn't see it because it was still covered in sand, which is something that people often forget. And so he was able to look the Sphinx in the eye, because you could do that in those days, and make a proper study of the patterns of the stripes on the headdress, which is called a nemes headdress, which the pharaoh wore on sacred or ritual occasions. And he also studied the eye stripe makeup patterns on the face. And then he went round and looked at all the statues that were known in all the museums in Cairo, and he wrote off to his friends. He wrote to Heinrich Schaefer in Germany and all sorts of people, and somebody in London to go to the British Museum, and they basically did a great survey of all the patterns of this headdress and eye stripe patterns on all the faces known from all the statues that anyone had excavated and put into a museum. And he did this survey, and he was able to demonstrate that the head and face, as we now see it, had to be of Middle Kingdom date, which is the 12th dynasty, because that was the only time in Egyptian history when these patterns were used. And then the Sphinx was excavated in 1926 and ultimately finally excavated in 1936. And everybody realized that the Sphinx obviously was far older than the 12th dynasty, and so his article was thought to be a load of rubbish. And everybody just sort of threw it away and laughed at him and said that was Burckhardt's folly, what an idiot, and so on. But overlooked the fact that he was only talking about the head because he couldn't see the body when he wrote his article. And nobody seems to have thought until I got hold of this article and read it that maybe he was right about the only thing he could see, namely the head, and that it was a recarved head, and that he was correctly analyzing the date of the recarved head, which I do believe to be true. And so I researched it some more myself, and based upon Burckhardt's original insight and further work that I did, was able to identify the face very precisely as that of the third pharaoh of the 12th dynasty, whose name is Amenemhet II. And I then found his face elsewhere, and I was able to put what we know to be his face side by side with the Sphinx's face, and you can see that they're identical. And in fact, I drew upon an analysis of that pharaoh's face by an Egyptologist called Biri Fay, which was quite a brilliant analysis, in order to prove that the faces really were identical. Every facial feature was analyzed. And so we now know that the recarving took place in the Middle Kingdom and whose face that is. And so then the question comes as to why would he do it, even if he was a very vain person who wanted everybody to think what a good-looking guy he was, which is true, he was. Why would he mutilate Anubis? And then I realized that it must be because the original head had been mutilated before his time, and the obvious time when that would have happened was at the end of the Old Kingdom period, when we know that civilization essentially collapsed in Egypt for about 150 years. There was no law and order, and the Egyptologists all know that mobs rampaged all through Giza, smashing all the statues. And right. At that time, it would have been easy for them to knock the nose and the ears off of Anubis and leave a kind of stump.
Well, let's get back to that in just a minute. After the break, I'd like to talk about that and also about your discovery of the whole mystique about the secret chambers under the Sphinx, which has been always a source of controversy. I'm speaking with Robert Temple, the author of The Sphinx Mystery, along with Olivia Temple, and we'll be right back with Dreamland after this.
Subscribers, don't miss this weekend's live chat with Joseph Farrell on White Powder Gold and the Philosopher's Stone, 10 to 11 a.m. Saturday, August the 15th, the unknowncountry.com subscriber section. And if you miss it, transcripts remain up permanently.
I am back. This is Peter Lavenda with Dreamland. I'm speaking with Robert Temple, author of The Sphinx Mystery. For those of you who want more information about about the book in general, go to his website, which is www.sphinxmystery.info, and you're going to see full-color photographs that were included in the book, as well as a lot of extra information and updates. It's well worth just a quick look to take a look at that, and I, of course, heartily recommend the book itself. Just before the break, we were talking about the smashing of the head of Anubis off of the Sphinx during the Old Kingdom, or the end of the Old Kingdom period. And part of the mystique about the Sphinx, and this has been covered in books like Picknett and Prince's famous book, The Stargate Conspiracy, and a number of other books, there has been a kind of mystique about secret chambers and secret passages under the Sphinx that will be revealed at some later date. But you actually, in your research, you've gone through and said, well, prior to 1926, people did know about these sort of things, and there was a lot of documentation written. You've covered a lot of the translations of previously, I wouldn't say inaccessible documents, but things that no one had looked at, let's put it that way, for hundreds of years. And you found that there was a lot of evidence for chambers of various kinds. In fact, you've gone through a few of them, haven't you?
Yes, in fact, they're all in the book. At the back, we've got every description of the Sphinx published from the time of Pliny in the 1st century A.D. up until 1837, when we got tired and stopped. And I discovered, by chance, researching in an old 18th century book from 1715, in fact, another subject, I came across a reference to the Sphinx, which referred to a chamber beneath the Sphinx, and I thought, oh, that's very strange. And it referred to earlier travelers' reports about this chamber. So I didn't know what to do, because all I knew it was travelers in Egypt before 1715. But what travelers? And I had to really get my psychic equipment out and start working away at trying to find these things. And I eventually succeeded in tracking them all down and discovered, and it's all in the book, everything quoted fully, 281 years' worth of continuous publications of eyewitness accounts of people who actually entered and saw the chamber beneath the Sphinx, which they described as being covered in hieroglyphics and containing the remnants of a wooden coffin. In other words, this chamber had been pillaged in antiquity, but the remnants of a coffin were there, and it was clearly a burial chamber. And it's not the same as what I call the rump tunnel at the back, under the Sphinx's bottom, where there's a scooped-out bit in the bedrock, which is a little cubicle. This is a proper chamber, a burial chamber. And as I say, it had hieroglyphics on the walls. And it was directly below the haunches of the Sphinx. And the information that survives from these early accounts is so precise that it describes the size and shape of the entrance to the vertical shaft, which went down from the Sphinx's back to the chamber. And it describes exactly, to the inch practically, where this was on top of the Sphinx's body, how many feet from the back of the head, how many feet from the rump, and so on. And we therefore know exactly where it is. And if you look at the plans of the Sphinx from above, you can see there's a blob there where the shaft used to be. And in fact, there is a crack in the bedrock that goes across this very point, which I think was probably caused by the intrusion of this shaft shattering the bedrock and causing that crack. And so it was completely filled up with concrete in 1926 by a Frenchman called Émile Barrès, whose job it was to tidy up the Sphinx for tourism. And his way of doing that was to fill in all the holes and cracks, and he had no interest really in the archaeology. He was just interested in tidying things up like a kind of manic housewife.
I see. My next question is sort of follows directly from this. You note the existence of the secret chambers, or so, quote unquote secret chambers, and you talk in the book about the mythology behind this that seems to be representing a cult of resurrection. What connection do you see between the Sphinx mystery that you spent years documenting and your earlier work on the Sirius mystery? Is there a continuum of belief where resurrection is concerned, astronomical phenomenon, that sort of thing? Do you find these two elements linked? Because in the Sirius mystery, you did hint at an Egyptian origin, perhaps, for some of this. Do you think that there is some kind of continuum of belief or understanding or practice between these two?
Yes. The Sphinx mystery has been written to be self-contained and to not have to refer to any other book.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
really, when you're dealing with matters as complex as all of this, what you try to write books which can stand alone, but they obviously have connections with one another. It isn't always the case that you can spell that out explicitly, because the Sphinx mystery is so restricted to the Sphinx per se. It's already 600 pages long with 375 pictures, and my publisher told me it was the longest book he'd ever published. If it had been a page longer, he would have screamed. And so there's a limit to what you can do in a single volume. But in the next book that I'm doing, which is called Egyptian Dawn, which will come out next spring, more of these connections are made obvious. In other words, the Sphinx mystery will be referred back to. The pyramids are discussed in that one, and the Sphinx temple and the Valley temple are analyzed to death, practically. And a lot of extraordinary things are revealed, and it all sort of hangs together more. But the last two chapters of the Sphinx mystery do go way off into other directions. And that's on purpose, because that's kind of preparation for the next book to come. That's why I spent so much time analyzing the iconography of the famous crypt at Dendera with all those weird things in it.
Right.
And showing that they're all connected with these same ideas of resurrection, the netherworld, and the sacred golden angle of resurrection, which is intimately related to the pyramids. And I do put, as you know, in the book, this plan which shows that the three main Giza pyramids and Sphinx, those four monuments together, are rigidly planned in relation to one another as part of a single unified design concept. And so it's entirely based upon the golden angle.
Right. I mean, that's a breathtaking part of the book, of course, is the discussion of the golden angle and the drawings that show the relationship of the Sphinx to the pyramids and to this angle, even including how shadows are cast at specific times of the year to reinforce the idea that there is a golden angle and that it actually is a marker to the shafts within the pyramids themselves. Isn't that correct?
Yes, absolutely. The angle, for those who don't know, is 26 degrees, 33 minutes, and 54 seconds. That's what I call the golden angle. It's the acute angle of a triangle that you can construct using the golden section. And it was considered the sacred angle of the Egyptians, and it's the basis of all of their sacred art and architecture. And nothing was allowed to be done without it. And in fact, it's in the Great Pyramid to a bewildering extent, some of which I've already described in an earlier book called The Crystal Sun.
Yes.
And there's much more to all of this, but I did give a great deal of attention to it at the end of the Sphinx mystery, because it is the angle of resurrection, and the whole Giza plateau really is devoted to this concept of resurrection. And if you're looking for a connection to the material to do with Sirius, more to do with Sirius comes back into Egyptian Dawn, but the whole question as to where the pyramids came from and what was really going on is a very open one. And resurrection is very much related to all of those ideas, very deeply so.
So you're relating resurrection essentially to astronomical ideas.
Yes, definitely.
I did a little bit of research along those lines myself in a book I wrote a couple of years ago called Stairway to Heaven, which I started with a description of the pyramid text and tried to understand that perhaps the seven stages referred not to the seven so-called platonic planets, but to seven stars, in particular Ursa Major. That's another whole discussion. But
I'm very interested in. I recently got The Secret Temple. I haven't read it yet. It's just arrived not long ago, and I want to read this Stairway to Heaven of yours because I believe you discussed Chinese alchemy in that.
Yes, I do. I have a strong interest in China. I've also actually lectured once at Tsinghua University I was involved in China trade for a number of years. But the China trade came out of the fact that I was interested in Chinese alchemy. It's a whole long story, and I won't bore you or the other listeners with it right now.
Well, I hope you'll bore me with it some other time.
Absolutely, I'd love to. I mean, your relationship with Needham and all the rest of it is a source of endless fascination for me. But I'm going to have to take a break right now. Tell our listeners that we're talking to Robert Temple, the author of the latest book, The Sphinx Mystery, The Forgotten Origins of the Sanctuary of Anubis. I'm Peter Levenda, and we'll be right back with Dreamland.
This is Whitley Strieber's Dreamland. Expert hosts, unique information.
And we're back. I'm Peter Levenda for Dreamland. Our very special interview with Robert Temple, the author with his wife, Olivia Temple, of The Sphinx Mystery, The Forgotten Origins of the Sanctuary of Anubis. We've been talking about angles and pyramids and Anubis and astronomy and the ideas of resurrection connected with the stars. As I mentioned at the very top of this interview, Robert Temple had written a book called The Sirius Mystery, which gave a great deal of evidence for the fact, or for the idea, rather, that we had been visited, as human beings, we had been visited something like between 3,000 and 5,000 years ago, I suppose, by visitors from the Sirius star system, and that an African tribe in Mali called the Dogon had meticulous records of this. I mean, they had calendars and rituals based on it, and it was that book that drove me to find the original book by the Frenchman called Pale Fox on the Dogon, and to do that research and to come up with a lot of other ideas. It was a very stimulating and seminal book, The Sirius Mystery. And what Dr. Temple is telling us is that a book that's coming out even later will start to tie all of these things in together. I'm fascinated by this. But one thing that did jump out at me when The Sirius Mystery was reissued a couple of years ago was your story of how intelligence agencies were attracted somehow to the fact that you were researching the Dogon. Is this something you care to talk about, just although it's not apropos of the Sphinx Mystery? I don't think.
Sure. When I revised and expanded the Sirius Mystery in its 1998 edition with 50% additional material, I wrote a lot in the first chapter, which was a completely new chapter, about the history of basically harassment, and you could even call it persecution, although I hope I don't have a persecution complex, by the security agencies because of the book. And I also described there how a friend of mine who was a 33rd degree Mason approached me and asked me to become a Mason, which I then became. I went through the 3 degrees. So that I could speak to him. He couldn't talk to me openly until I had gone through the 3 degrees about the Sirius Mystery, which he says was of great interest to the research people in Washington, which was the headquarters of this the Scottish Rite. And a lot of the top people in the country, like Gerald Ford, for instance, are 33rd degree Masons, and but then he died, unfortunately, between the 2nd and 3rd degree from me. So I never got to find out what it was he wanted to discuss that he said was so important that I had to become a Mason for it. He had become a Mason because my grandfather was a 32nd degree Mason, and he introduced him into Masonry. He sponsored him. And so he felt that it was his duty to sort of show favor to me as a return favor for what my grandfather had done for him. My grandfather didn't become a 33rd degree Mason, even though he was asked to, because he just didn't have the time. And it's quite a hard life being a 33rd degree Mason, because you've got all these tremendous administrative responsibilities and travel and everything. Mm-hmm. But I didn't then pursue Masonry particularly after that, because I haven't got time, really, to sit around having dinner with people and talking about things that aren't really that interesting, because it takes so long to work your way up the degrees to where you can talk to anybody about anything that's really of interest that I just gave it up. So that never really happened. But there's no doubt that the Sirius Mystery and everything to do with these Egyptian subjects is intimately related with the Masonic tradition and any number of other secret societies.
I understand, but it seems odd to me that the intelligence agencies would be interested in this. I mean, I only mention all of this because it was a source of fascination for me as well. The degree to which the intelligence agencies and sometimes the secret societies kind of overlap, at least in their approach
very
to
much
reality.
So. Well, you know, the security agencies don't like me because I think, and that's not allowed.
Exactly. I can understand that. Well, we have another thing sort of in common. You were a friend of Arthur Young, I believe, for some time. I never
very
knew
much so. He was a kind of mentor. I met him when I was 16.
Wow. Well,
we were very, very closely connected for 5 years that I spent in Philadelphia, where he lived.
Yeah.
Because I went to university when I was 16, you see.
Right.
And that was at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And the chap who turned out to be my best friend at Penn, his father had worked with Arthur on developing the Bell helicopter. And so when John went to Penn, he was older than me, his father put him in touch with Arthur. And then when I turned up, I met John almost immediately. When I got there, he immediately took me around to Arthur's house. And so from that time on, I was intimately involved with Arthur's work and helped him with his 2 books, the Geometry of Meaning, in which he actually acknowledges me in the front, and the other one, The Reflexive Universe, where he forgot to acknowledge me, even though I helped him more on that one than on the other one. Mm-hmm. And we worked very closely together. It may sound a strange sort of friendship, but that's what we did. And it was tremendous fun. And I spent much more time working with Arthur and doing all that than I spent at the university doing my courses and things.
Well, Arthur Young has been a focus of my research for a long time.
Really?
In 2 different directions. One, of course, was his early involvement with Andrija Puharich in the early 1950s. In that bizarre seance group they had going for a while called the Nine, and which the Astors belonged to and the DuPonts, and Puharich had written about it in a couple of places. And I thought it was fascinating that Arthur Young would be involved with that. And then, of course, the other direction is, his stepdaughter-in-law being Ruth Paine, and the connection to the Kennedy assassination from there. When I came across Arthur Young's name going through the Warren Commission reports, I was sort of shocked. And I said, whoa, how many degrees of separation is that really? It's just 2 or 3 handshakes away from Oswald. So Arthur Young became this topic of conversation for me and a focus of research for years because I was fascinated by him. I had read Geometry of Meaning when it came out, and I was, I only knew Arthur Young from that perspective. And then to find out all the other strange and interesting connections around him, swirling around him. He was really a center for a lot of forward thinking, a lot of very outside of the box, as they say, thinking, not just in the paranormal, but in almost everything. I find him a fascinating individual. Anyway,
I guess I knew Arthur just about as well as anybody, and he was a real genius.
Yes, I think that's safe to say. Also, we both did meet one person. Well, I know you didn't particularly care for him, and I didn't really know him that well, and that was Harry Smith. Yeah.
I had such an instant revulsion to Harry Smith, and Arthur was so shocked. He said, "What have you got against Harry? I know he's eccentric, I know he's weird, and all of that, but he went on about how interesting Harry was and what great stuff he did, and even though he was weird, and you had to learn how to put up with Harry," he said. I said, "I don't have to learn how to put up with him. I don't like him." As soon as I set eyes on him, I was instantly off this guy. There was just something about him that was black, and I wouldn't have anything to do with him, and I walked out of the room, and that was it.
Well,
I just couldn't stand Harry Smith.
For our listeners who don't know who Harry Smith was, he passed away a few years ago. He was always around. He was an artist of sorts. He was a musician. He was involved. When I met him, he was trying to put together a very strange video presentation of the Enochian watchtowers. I mean, I was introduced to him by some Aleister Crowley people from
Well,
the
that's the trouble. That's the trouble.
Yeah.
Wasn't he? Didn't he claim to be Crowley's illegitimate son?
I think that was one of his many claims to fame, yes. But he was an interesting character. I just bring that up in case our listeners are taking notes and they want to know all the degrees of separation that exist.
Well, I'm 100% opposed to Aleister Crowley and all that he stands for.
I understand that. I kind of get that from your writing, even though you've never actually said that in print.
I'm very opposed to black magic.
Of course. I mean, who wouldn't be? Unless they're lying.
I knew people who knew Crowley really well, and I know what he got up to, and I do not approve.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We are going to take a break in a minute, but before we do, one more question I want to ask. Again, not apropos. We'll get back to the Sphinx mystery in earnest after the break. But am I correct? Do I understand correctly that you did go to Mexico to Acámbaro?
I didn't go to Acámbaro, but Arthur went there a lot. And
Arthur did a lot, yeah.
Well, he was a very, very close friend of Julesrud, and
right.
You know, I've recently put, or at least I only just the other day, I hope they're on, put a lot of photos of the Acámbaro figurines on my website. Mm-hmm. I wrote a very strange account of my meeting with Salvador Dali that was all to do with the Acámbaro figurines, which I put on my website.
Yes, I've read that. It was fascinating. Mm-hmm.
But Arthur was just obsessed by this subject because, he paid for a lot of dating work to be done in it. And, well, that's a long story, the Acámbaro
Sure,
figurines.
yes, right. I just thought I'd bring that up. Again, our listeners who are familiar with the story know that there were a lot of figurines in this small town in Mexico, which seem to suggest that humans and dinosaurs coexisted at one point. I mean, that's the short story. Earl Stanley Gardner, who wrote the Perry Mason mysteries, wrote a book about that as well. And he went down there also fascinated by this. And, of course, Arthur Young, and listeners who are familiar with my work know about my fascination with Arthur Young. I just want to bring all of this in to show that the Robert Temple story is quite complex and has many different angles and avenues, and it's an interesting life. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back in a few minutes. This is Peter Levenda talking with Robert Temple, author of The Sphinx Mystery for Dreamland. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Dreamland, serious wonder spoken here.
And we're back with Dreamland, the Dreamland interview with Robert Temple. My name is Peter Levenda. We're talking about The Sphinx Mystery, Robert Temple's latest book with his wife Olivia Temple, and it's subtitled The Forgotten Origins of the Sanctuary of Anubis. I like the subtitle, The Sanctuary of Anubis. It means that we have to rethink Giza, in general. It makes absolute sense that Anubis would be the guardian over the pyramids. Now that you mentioned it in your book, it seems like we should have known this all along. What do you take away from the research? I mean, it's a huge book, and it's endlessly fascinating. It's filled with data that would satisfy the most exacting of researchers, and the translations at the rear of the book are worth the price of admission anyway. The translations of all the various accounts of people's first experiences with the Sphinx going back, as you say, to the time of Pliny. So you've come away with this. You've moved to write this book. What is motivating you at this point in this research? I mean, what is the overriding concern that you have? What is giving you the energy to do this, quite frankly?
Well, I don't have any personal interest in any of these things. I only do it because it's my job. I'm here to reveal mysteries, but I don't get anything out of it personally other than I enjoy my work because I know I'm good at it. I'm basically doing this for other people. I seem to know all these things anyway. I'm just going to all this trouble so that I can create these books with all the footnotes and references that everybody can check in order to establish these things so that the public at large can have this information. I don't get any anything out of it at all, personally.
Mm-hmm. But it is your motivating factor then is the idea that you want to reveal the mysteries. I mean, you want to penetrate.
Well, I don't even want to reveal them. I just feel that it's my duty. I'm just doing a job. I'm like a kind of research machine. You turn me on and I work.
Okay. We're going to be talking with Olivia Temple in the subscriber interview. Obviously, she's quite a presence throughout the Sphinx mystery in one way or the other. It seems like a wonderful working relationship that you have.
Yes, we do everything together. We sit in the same office all day, and we're together all evening, of course. And we're never really separated. And I guess that's a real test of a marriage, isn't it?
It sure is. Because
Olivia was 19 when I met her, and we've been together just for a few years. We really do everything together. She has proofread all my books, and she's basically my editor. We've done 2 books jointly as co-authors. The earlier one was a Penguin Classic, The Complete Fables of Aesop, which we had tremendous fun doing. It only took a couple of years, and we spent the whole time laughing because it was so hilarious. All these this terribly corny ancient Greek jokes, which is what Aesop is all about. And now we've done the Sphinx mystery together because we do all our exploring and archaeological work together, and we just do everything together. We're like sort of twins.
Do you find yourself attracting any attention from people who do have agendas, especially where Egyptology is concerned? There seems to be
They don't like me. Really, I get an awful lot of shit from these people. They go to unbelievable lengths to insult me, to be vile, disgusting, rude, revolting. But there's always exceptions. I have some very, very good friends who are Egyptologists, but they keep their heads down because they know it's not the consensus to be nice to me. So the trouble is that I'm overeducated, I'm hyper-intellectual, I know more than all these guys who ponce around with their incredible vanity and arrogance, pretending to be great intellects and great academics. And I think most of them are idiots, and they know it. And I can out-scholarship them any day in any field. So I don't have any respect for these people who think so highly of themselves. To me, they're just fools, and I don't hide my attitude towards them. When I respect somebody, I really respect them, and I tell them so. Like you, for instance, Peter, you've been doing some interesting work.
Well, thank you. That's coming from you. That's very high praise.
Oh, yeah.
I was wondering if you had a good relationship with Dr. Zaki Hawass, for instance.
Who?
Dr. Hawass of the Egyptian Museum, the Egyptian Antiquities.
I despise the man. He's a maniac, he's a psychopathic weirdo who should have been locked up in an asylum years ago.
I'm very happy.
And I don't mean to criticize him. I'm only describing him.
Yeah, I know that's been the reaction of some of the other people that I know who worked in that field. They come away with sort of the same idea. He kind of has monopolized the whole field in Egypt. I mean, he's the guy you have to go to, I guess, in order to get into the pyramids or anything else. But
well, let me tell you an experience I had with Hawass. The first time Olivia and I got our archaeological permission to do some work from this, what they call the Supreme Council of Antiquities, you have to, it takes an awful long time to get the archaeological permission, and we finally got it, and we were thrilled. This was a Greek colleague. And I thought, because we had permission to take dating samples. This is an archaeometric project where we were redating key monuments using a new dating technique that dates stone structures directly. And so, and none of that's published yet, but we got some amazing results. And we had permission to do the pyramids and the Sphinx Valley Temple and down at Abydos and so on. So I thought, well, I better go and see Hawass. I met him a few times. I realized that he thought incredibly highly of himself and was a real tricky character. But I thought, well, and Olivia encouraged me. She's always encouraging me to try to be nice to people because maybe they might be nice back, although they really aren't that time.
The eternal optimist.
He's an optimist. And so I thought, okay, let's go see Hawass. So we both went to Hawass, armed with this piece of paper, which we were so proud, with all the signatures of Gabala and Faguer and so on the thing giving us our permission. Because at that time, Hawass was only the director of the Giza Plateau. And I said, well, Dr. Hawass, we're here. We've got the permission to do this various work at Giza, and I thought we'd come and just give you advance warning because I know we still have the long process of the security permission to go through, and it will be many months before we can start work. But I thought that while I'm here, we'd come to see you. This was his office that he had at Giza, and just say hello and maybe have a brief preliminary discussion about how we might go about things and what we might do later on, many months from now. He was furious, of course. He's generally furious. I mean, furious is routine for him. So I handed him the piece of paper, and he crumpled it up in a bowl and threw it at my face and screamed at me, purple with rage. And he said, "This means nothing."
Oh my goodness!
And it only had the signature on it of the head of the Supreme Council of Antiquity,
right, yes,
a man whom he violently hated, called Gabala, an incredibly nice man, by the way. I recommend Gabala very highly. Immensely sophisticated and civilized and polite and learned and everything else. Everything that Hawass isn't. And so I was very taken aback because I'm very rarely nonplussed, but in this case I really was. I didn't know. The last thing I expected that he would be that brazen, and we beat a hasty retreat. But then when you get your security clearance in Egypt, it takes forever. It took 9 months. It always takes 9 months the first time, and then when you go back the second time, they've done a lot of that, so it's only 3 months. And you have to be approved by the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the police, the secret police, and the Antiquities police, all 6 of them. And that takes a long time because it's all carried by hand from building to building over a period of many months. And I made a joke after I got it. I said, well, I'm really glad that the Egyptian Air Force it doesn't seem to be worried about me because, I just stole my last fighter plane. And this was considered to be very, very, very bad form. You don't make this kind of joke in Egypt.
Right, I guess so.
Not allowed to be humorous when it comes to the Air Force or anything.
No. Well, for those listeners who are wondering who we're talking about, Dr. Hawass, if you remember that President Obama recently visited the pyramids when he gave his Cairo speech, you will have noticed a man in a floppy hat standing next to him and introducing him to the various antiquities at the pyramids, and that was Dr. Hawass. Dr. Temple, we're running out of time, unfortunately. There's so many more questions that I had and so much more that we could have talked about, but I really wanted to make sure that our listeners understood that the Sphinx mystery, the forgotten origins of the sanctuary of Anubis, is an absolutely fascinating, breathtaking accomplishment. It will make you go back and look at the pyramids and the Sphinx from a completely different perspective, and one which is based on the documents, one which is based on reality, not just on the fantasies of the Egyptologists of the last 100 years or so, but on actually very hard and painstaking research that was done. Those of you interested in Egyptian mysteries, in the Egyptian religion, in the Egyptian culture of ancient Egypt, those of you planning a trip to Egypt sometime in the future, this book is a necessity. It's going to make you head and shoulders much better informed than probably your tour guides, for sure. I want to thank Robert Temple for taking this time to speak with us. Go to his website. It's www.sphinxmystery.info. It's got great material on there, a lot of photographs, a lot of reviews, and other articles that Robert Temple has written for Masonic magazines, among others, on this very, very important subject. Dr. Temple, once again, it's a big pleasure for me to be speaking with you after having come across you back in 1976, which dates both of us, I suppose. But thanks very much, and I hope to speak with you again soon.
Great. I enjoyed it, Peter. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
This is Peter Levenda for Dreamland. There will be a subscriber interview with Olivia Temple. That will also be fascinating, and I encourage those who have not looked at the other documentation you've amassed. You come away with this understanding that I think you even used the illusion of the Emperor's new clothes. I mean, we've been told that the Sphinx is a lion for so long, and I grew up believing that and not questioning it until you came along and questioned it. And by questioning it, you've opened up an entire category of research into everything from the golden angle of resurrection, as you call it, to the resurrection cult itself that was based on the pyramids. I mean, it calls for a reevaluation of what we thought we knew. And the fact that the Sphinx was actually originally Anubis makes obvious sense. I mean, it's excellent. It's common sense, you might say. I'm just blown away by the research itself.
Well, thank you. It took some doing to try to figure out whose face was on the recarved head. And I can't claim credit for being original there because what I did was I excavated an old article published towards the end of the 19th century by a German Egyptologist called Ludwig Burckhardt, which everybody had dismissed long ago, called On the Age of the Sphinx at Giza, in German, of course. I translated this whole thing. It's all in appendix in English, and that was very difficult because Burckhardt was a stuffy sort of fellow, and he read this pompous Victorian German. It's so difficult to read. And he wrote this before the Sphinx was properly excavated. So, and stuck on the top of one end was this little pimple that was in place of a head. And it was so out of proportion that really one wanted to burst out laughing. It was too ridiculous. And it was immediately obvious that it couldn't have been the original head, that it must have been cut down and recarved, because the Egyptians never did anything like that. Nobody in the history of the world has been more fanatical about correct proportion in buildings and statues and pictures than the Egyptians. To put a tiny head on a giant body would be impossible for them. They could never hold their heads up again for shame. So there was something really wrong there. And that was the first thing. And then we looked at the body and we thought, well, that's not a lion. And we looked and we looked, and we kept trying to see a lion. And really we began to think we must be lion dyslexic because we obviously lacked the ability which other people had, which was the ability to see lions. And it just wasn't there. And so we're both great dog lovers, and our dog was alive at that time, and we said, well, it looks like him. And because it's got a completely straight back, you see, and it's crouching there just like a dog crouches when it's guarding you. When Olivia guarded, when our dog was alive, she used to do that with her back to Olivia in exactly the pose of the Sphinx.
The world, cover to cover, just all of your books have been a tremendous contribution to what we know, or to reveal what we don't know about ancient history. And your approach has been such that I think it's on your website. Rupert Sheldrake says it best. It's integrative thinking, and I think this kind of approach is exactly what we need to understand the esoteric nature of what's gone on before. I mean, to understand the Sphinx, I mean, you make a very good point in the very opening of your book. You go to see the Sphinx, and you're looking at it, and you're stunned that there's something terribly wrong with what you've been told about the Sphinx, that the consensus reality we've grown up with is obviously drastically in error. Could you tell us just a little bit about how you came upon that conclusion that there was something wrong with what everybody knew, quote unquote, about the Sphinx?
Well, when Olivia and I first saw it, we were just minding our own business and being ordinary tourists, and we weren't expecting to find anything unusual. We thought we were going to see the Sphinx. And then we saw this thing, and it wasn't the Sphinx. And it was both instantly realized that everybody had everything all wrong. It just had so many things wrong with it that just they weren't right at all. And one of the first things that you could notice was that it was this gigantic stone statue that seemed to go on forever, about the size of an ocean liner.
I am Peter Lavenda, your host for this interview with a very, very special guest that I have been over-preparing for, you might say, because I don't want to lose this opportunity. What I'm going to say is that we're talking to a man who made a tremendous impact on a lot of people that I know with a book that he published in 1976 called The Serious Mystery. This book, which combined elements of Egyptian, African, Babylonian, Sumerian, Greco-Roman mythologies, cultures, technologies, to provide evidence for the possibility of alien contact more than 5,000 years ago or so, made a tremendous impact on a lot of people. Since then, he's written many other books, of course, and he was a colleague of another hero of mine, Dr. Joseph Needham, one of the foremost China specialists, with whom he wrote a book called The Genius of China, which is now a book that you'll find in Chinese being read in Chinese secondary schools. He's a visiting professor at Tsinghua University in Beijing, among other things. And we're going to talk to him today about his newest and latest book, which is a real stunner on in the same avenue as The Serious Mystery. It's called The Sphinx Mystery. And I'm very pleased today to introduce to you Dr. Robert Temple. Dr. Temple, how are you?
Hello. I'm fine. I'm blushing from your introduction.
Oh, not at all. I mean, I have been looking forward to this for a long time. I've been a fan of yours for many years, which probably dates both of us, but I've read nothing.
Looking outwards to guard her against the approach of whoever might come, And this is what dogs do. And lions don't look like that. They've got great big macho chests and manes, and so in the Sphinx Mystery, I gathered together lots of Egyptian canonical pictures of lions to show, even one with the grid lines, to show the geometrical way in which they constructed these. And I went back as far as the first dynasty to show early lions and how lions had never changed throughout Egyptian art history, and that they were always totally different from the Sphinx. And so it was obvious to us that this was a dog, and the famous dog is Anubis, the god Anubis, and that's obviously what this had once been, and that the head had somehow got lost, and a bit of it was left, and they'd carved a face on it later into this little tiny pimple, which they call a head. But when you see photos of the Sphinx, you see it from the front, so you see this wonderful face and head, and you don't realize that it's out of proportion with the body. Exactly. Pictures don't show you that. You have to be there.
Well, one thing that I can tell listeners, the book, The Sphinx Mystery, is lavishly illustrated, and it's really a gorgeous production because of the way you've handled the patina of the photographs, if you will, throughout the book. The photographic evidence shouts out for the kind of interpretation that you've done. When you look at the Sphinx from all these different angles, and then you look